In this lesson, we will look at the third chapter in Graham Simpson's book, A Student's Guide to New Testament Greek. In the previous chapter, we looked at the present tense verb and how it will appear in its present form. And along with that, we have also looked at the second declension masculine noun, and we have seen the masculine noun table as well. And we know that in Greek, the endings are of great importance. Now, in this chapter, in the third chapter of A Student's Guide to New Testament Greek, Graham Simpson explains the future tense as well as the definite article and also the second declension neuter gender noun. So let us start with the future tense in this session. As we look at the future tense, we will once again take the verb luo, which means I lose or I am losing, for our context, and we will see how it looks in its future form. Now, before going into that, we all know that in Greek, every tense have a table. So we have seen in the present tense, there was a present tense table. Likewise, in the future tense, we have a future tense table. And this is very easy to learn. If you know the present tense table, the future tense table is just going to be easy for you to learn and memorize. There is something that you and I need to notice in the future tense. So, come with me as we look at the future tense table with the luo verb for our context. Now we see luo in its present first person singular number will appear as luo, right? We have learned that in our previous session, in our previous lesson. So, when we see luo appearing in its future tense form, this is how luo will look like. First person singular, luso. First person plural, lusomen. Second person singular, luseis. Second person plural, lusete. Third person singular, lusei. Third person plural, lususin. Now, what is happening in the future tense table? You see, there is a sigma that is added at the end, right? So this addition of the sigma will tell you that a particular verb is in future form. In the future tense, it is the stem which is different. Just remember that. It is the stem which is different, but the ending remains the same. For our context with the luo verb, we see that o eis ei, omen ete usin remains the same, but there is a sigma added with the stem. So just remember this. So when you see the sigma added in the stem, you should automatically recognize that this verb is in its future tense form. The normal rule of the future stem is present stem plus sigma. That is the normal pattern in Greek which Greek follows. when a particular verb, when it will appear as a future tense, it will appear as the present stem plus the sigma in it. Let us move forward. The future stem of the following verbs can be explained as follows. Okay, now I want you to pay attention a little bit more. The first case, verbs whose present stem ends in a vowel. So just remember this. If a verb in its present form ends with a vowel, when it appears in its future form, a sigma is added in its stem. For example, like the word luo becomes luso. You see, it ends with an omega in its present form, but in its future form, it appears with a sigma added to its stem. The word akuo appears as akuso. So there is a sigma added in the stem and the ending remains the same. Therapiuo becomes therapiuso. That is the first case. Secondly, verbs whose present stem ends in zeta normally change to sigma again. For example, the word baptizo. Now, baptizo in the stem, in its present stem, there is a zeta there. But in the future, when it appears in its future form, that zeta is replaced by a sigma. Did you notice that? The word sozo. Sozo in its present stem contains a zeta in it. But when it is appearing in its future form, the zeta is replaced by a sigma. Thirdly, verbs whose present stem ends in pi, blepo, and phi will change to psi in its future stem. And these are called labials. This extra piece of information is for those who would like to go for higher studies. So, for example, like the word blepo. Blepo in its present stem ends with a pi, and then we have the ending with an omega. But when it appears in its future form, the future stem will replace pi with a psi. So how do we pronounce this? Blepo in future tense will become blepso. And these are called labials. Fourthly, verbs whose present stem ends in kappa, gamma, and chi will change to psi in its future stem. And these are called Gutrals. For example, the word dioko in its present stem ends with the letter or alphabet kappa. But when it appears in its future tense, in its future stem, the kappa will be replaced by a psi. So dioko in its future form will become a dioxo. Fifthly, a verb whose present stem ends in tau or delta or theta will change to sigma in its future stem. And these are called deltas. For example, the word peito, there is a theta there in its present stem. But this peitho, when it appears in its future form, the theta will be replaced by a sigma, and it will be pronounced as peiso. Now, I want to talk about another set of verbs which are known as the irregular verbs. And these verbs are going to cause great trouble and tribulations to us. Let us look at these irregular verbs. There are something called the irregular verbs in Greek. These set of verbs do not follow any rule whatsoever. You just need to learn them and memorize them the way they are. For our context, I call these verbs as naughty verbs. They will not follow any rules. They will not follow any patterns. So, follow the next example for more clarity. In this chapter, we will look at just 3 irregular verbs, namely heurisco, echo, and phero. Heurisco in its future form will look like heureso. So you see the iota is replaced by a eta. The kappa is removed in the future tense. And this word, this verb is not following any rule or any pattern whatsoever. The next word, echo, with a smooth breathing in its present form, will become hexo with a rough breathing in its future form. And we also notice that it is following some pattern of where the chi is replaced by a xi in its future form. But the rough breathing in the future form is changed from a smooth breathing in its present form. The third word is phero. Phero, which is in its present tense, becomes oiso in its future tense. You will have no clue when you see this word oiso in its future form that this is a word which is phero in its future tense. So all we need to do in knowing them is to just learn them and memorize them the way they are.